All right. Hello, and welcome to our community conversation series between Safe Harbor, Sheboygan County, and Child Protective Services. My name is Vanessa, and my role at Safe Harbor is in volunteer and community engagement. Our goals with this series are focused on creating a greater understanding about community agencies that victim survivors of sexual assault may report to, along with gaining clarity regarding the roles of those agencies, mechanisms of their support, and resources available through those agencies. This series also focuses on creating more awareness surrounding the options available to victims and survivors so that they're able to make more informed decisions about how they wish to navigate community resources. Today I'm joined with Beth by the Child Protective Services. Beth, welcome. And could you begin by introducing yourself and speaking on what your role and responsibilities are at CPS?
Sure. So I'm Beth Heilman. I am one of the social workers in Child Protective Service Intake Unit. Our Child Protective Services is divided between intake and ongoing. Intake is the unit that gets the calls that are screened in first. So once a call is screened in, it gets assigned to one of us in intake, and our role is to do a 60-day investigation. So during that investigation, we're working with the family, talking to everyone within the family that lives in the home to find out what happened and determine whether or not we believe the family could use ongoing support, or whether there maybe really wasn't much to the allegation, and then we kind of back out and we're done. So all of that is done within that first 60 days. So that's my role at Child Protective Services.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So what is the main goal and purpose of Child Protective Services?
So I always describe it to families that the main goal, our goal is to make a happy, healthy, functioning family. So obviously every family comes into hurdles and problems, and our goal is to make sure that we can work with them and hook them up with the resources that are necessary to hopefully avoid that happening in the future. I always tell them, I may really love working with you, but I hope to never see you cross my desk again, because it means that there's further problems. So really our goal is to just put the necessary resources in place to make sure that the family can get past that hard time and the hurdles and become well-functioning family.
Great. As it pertains to sexual violence, how does CPS usually get involved?
So our referrals come in from a multitude of different places. Really any mandated reporter, that could be a counselor, it could be a teacher, a principal, it could be a family friend. They don't have to be a mandated reporter. It could be a family member, a family friend. Really the sky's the limit on who can report. And then from there, it goes through a screening process. So sexual assault allegations are really no different. They may come from a counselor where a child finally feels comfortable disclosing. They could come from a parent that they felt comfortable talking to. Law enforcement, a lot of times it's law enforcement calling in, hey, we got this referral, and they know that we join in on that as well. So really multitude of people. We always tell kids, have a safe person, have somebody you feel comfortable talking to, and that person can make that report.
Awesome. So when it comes to sexual assault, what determines if or when a child is removed from the home? And if they have to be removed, who possibly would be the people they would stay with?
Okay. So removal, believe it or not, is one of the last things we want to do. No matter what the situation is at home, removal is traumatic for a child. No matter who you put them with, no matter what the circumstances is, there's trauma that's related to it. And so that's really our last effort. We try to put safety in place to manage that. So let's say a child is assaulted or allegedly assaulted by a parent. depending on if the other parent is considered safe, they may be able to stay with that parent, and the one that is accused can leave the home. Maybe the parent gets arrested and then the child is safe at home. You can also run into a situation where one parent did the alleged assault and the other parent knew about it. Well, then we can't really consider either of them safe. If the assault was by someone outside the home, they will be able to stay in their home, assuming their parent is considered protective. So really it's a process for us to find out whether there's a protective parent in the home that will keep that child safe and away from the alleged perpetrator. And if all else fails and it comes to there's no protective parent at home, then we will have to remove. Or if the parent is arrested and there's no protective parent, we will have to remove. It is our department's policy, and actually it is a statute that we follow, that we look at family first. So we're always looking for a family member that that child is comfortable around, that that child sees on a regular basis. And then we're going to place with them. If there is no family, we're going to try and look for family friends that maybe they know well. And if all else fails and there's no family and there's no friends and there's no one protective, then we look at a foster home. But that's really our last effort, because of course we know that any child is going to have less trauma if they're in the home of someone they know and are comfortable with. So that's kind of our breakdown of how we go through that. But really our goal is to always keep them in the family.
Wonderful. All right. If kiddos are removed from a home, does CPS help families get them returned? Or can you help families find resources to get their kids back?
Okay. So once a child is removed and our 60 days is up, the family is referred to our ongoing unit, and they go through the court. They follow through the court recommendations and whatever is recommended for the family. But our goal is always reunification. So the number one goal in almost every single case is to reunify the child with their parent. And that looks different for every family based on what their needs are, and what they have to do to show that they're safe. But regardless of how long the process is, that's our goal. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, and sometimes we have to look for guardianship or adoption. But really, we want to get them back in the home. So the ongoing workers are working with the family to work through those problems, whether it's they get in counseling individually or as a family. Maybe they need AODA help. Maybe they need housing. Maybe they need parenting classes. Whatever it may be, they're going to be working through that process and working closely with the social worker until they get to a point where they can show that they can safely have that child back in the home. Now, sometimes when it's directly related to a sexual assault case, depending on how that ends up in court, maybe reunification isn't a likely alternative. Maybe they are going to be looking at guardianship. The goal is to just really be mindful of what that child is going through, make sure that child is getting the resources that they need, and at the same time helping the family make sure that they have the resources they need as well.
Great. Could you share what trauma-informed care looks like for CPS?
So just like in the schools or other places, we really, really push for the trauma approach. So we're making sure that we are mindful of what trauma the family has gone through. So when we do an assessment, our 60-day assessment, we look into the family's entire past. So we sit down with the parents and we want to know what their lives look like from birth to where we are right now. So I always explain it to my families I work with that there's an incident that got us here, okay? And we can't ignore that, but that's not what's most important to me. What's most important is what led up to that point and how do we make sure that doesn't happen moving forward? So I look at that, what led up to that point is that trauma piece, because I want to know what's happened in your life to get you to this point, because I know that there is a strong likelihood that their upbringing wasn't that great either, and that the trauma they experienced as a youth has brought them to where they are now. And so I always want to be mindful of that so that I can make sure maybe you need counseling to get past some form of grief, or maybe child abuse that wasn't dealt with when you were a child. So making sure that they get that help. And then again, when we're removing, we're always mindful of how it's going to be the least traumatic for the child. For example, if I have to go to a home with a police officer, maybe it's an unsafe situation for me, and I have to bring a police officer. Well, I'm going to try and make that experience the least traumatic for the child, because perhaps that child hasn't had good experience with law enforcement. I'm going to make sure that if the child has to be removed, the child is going to come with me. The child's going to come in my car, not to make it an even more terrifying experience than it has to be. So really, it isn't just picking through the current situation, it's looking at the big picture and how do we really work at making that less traumatic moving forward.
Great. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So what does communication look like for families working with CPS?
As far as directly with us or with other organizations?
Directly with CPS.
So really, when we're in the investigative stage, we're looking for the families to be communicating with us quite often, depending on the allegation and depending on if we have to remove. If we have to remove a child, we're talking to those families a lot because we're coordinating visits. We want to make sure that that child is seeing that parent as soon as possible and as often as possible, because again, that is part of that trauma piece. We're expecting that they're talking through things with us and making sure we know what's going on. Are you going out and getting services? Can we talk to those service providers to make sure that we're taking care of everything? If it's maybe a case that we aren't needing to do as much, or maybe we have already determined that maybe it wasn't to the level that was reported to us, then maybe we aren't going to have as much communication with them. But really, especially with removal and once they're in the ongoing unit, we want to be having regular conversations to make sure that we're all on the same page. And normally the parents are pretty good. They don't want to do anything that's going to hurt their case more. And most families really recognize that, yeah, we could use the help and you can be helpful.
Great. Thank you. All right. Last question. If there was one thing you wanted the Sheboygan community to know about CPS, what would it be?
This is what I tell everyone I get the opportunity to tell. We are not the bad guys. And by that, I mean, we get a very bad reputation for all we do is come in and take kids away. And I really want the community to know that that is not the case. We very, I guess in the big picture, we seldom take custody of kids. Yes, it happens, but it's our last resort. And with that, I want people to know the good we can do. So when we aren't removing kids, and it isn't a bad thing when we are, because it's normally to help the family, to give them that time, give them that space to get themselves better. But really what I want people to know is we're social workers. Our role is to help. Our role is to get them connected with resources. We want families to be healthy. We want parents to be healthy. We know parents make mistakes. We know that adults make mistakes, and we really just want to do whatever it takes to make it a well-functioning family. So we aren't the people that come in and swoop in and make people's lives miserable. We really can do so much more once the family welcomes that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being with us today, Beth, and
Yeah,
sharing about
absolutely.
CPS.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your time.